Hello. Bill Atherton. Quick, quick, quick! All right, go away. Bill Atherton. Steve Johnson here. Why don't you come on down? Steve Johnson did effects in the film. Mark Wilson. Did you rent here? Mark didn't make it? You're kidding. Oh, we got two down. Billy Bryan. Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. We have not yet heard from Ernie, so he may not be here. I apologize for that. And then Joe Medjuck, the producer. So again, I do want to apologize that Ernie's not here, and that we're missing another person, but let's start our Q&A if we can. The first thing that we're going to ask Joe is, we keep hearing all these wonderful rumors of Ghostbusters 3. Are they just rumors?
It's not impossible. There is a script. I mean, this has been in the press, so I'm not giving you any secrets. And it's true. It sounds a bit funny. There's a script. Danny and Harold have worked on it. It was written by two other guys with Ivan's supervision and Danny and Harold having input. Sony says they'd like to make it. Everyone thinks it's a good script. Bill's heard it's a good script. He hasn't read it. And he just says Bill's like that. He just says he's busy.
He's too busy.
He's too busy. No, but Harold tells a very funny story about it. Several months it took to get Bill to read Groundhog Day. And every week or so he'd phone him and said, I read 10 pages. They're really good. Is it going to stay this good? So he'd phone him every week and say, well, I read 20 pages now. But he hasn't even read 10 pages yet, to the best of our knowledge. So we don't know. But it's not impossible.
So, as a producer of 2 hits, and you're looking at this third potential hit there, is there anything that you can do? I mean, it's just you're waiting on the talent?
Yeah, basically. I mean, it's if the time seems right. I'm not the only producer, by the way. I like to be referred to as the producer. Obviously, Ivan's the producer as well as director of the first one, and Mike Gross and I were working with them.
Michael Gross.
Worked with these guys on the West Coast almost all the time. I was in New York on the, with the live shooting crew. Mike came out a couple of times, but basically, and they went simultaneously. The special effects were being done at the same time as we were shooting. So anyway, we did the film in less than a year, and that's why it was possible.
So let's talk a little bit about what it was like to actually work on this film from the get-go. You guys did special effects, you did a number of different things. Why don't you talk about what you specifically did? And then why don't we get into puppeteer?
Well, exactly. Well, Richard Edlund opened the Boss Film Corporation specifically to do this film. He had just come down from ILM and he wanted to open his own company. And so he opened a ghost shop and he did the optical effects, the model effects, the miniatures, and also the ghosts. And so he hired Randy Cook and myself to be in charge of the ghost shop. And this was long before digital effects. I mean, if you take a look at this film now, if you got this script in 2011 and you saw You broke it down and you had some amorphous green text Avery Slimer character, it would be done digitally, right? If you had a giant marshmallow man like Bill played here, digital. Totally be done digital, but back in those days, it was handmade film crafts. And so Randy and I split the work up, and Randy is a stop motion animator, and he did the Terror Dogs, and I handled the librarian transformation, Slimer, the subway ghost, and Bill handled the Marshmallow Man, and that's how it all started.
Let's talk about the Marshmallow Man. What was it like being in that costume? What was it like doing the puppeteering?
Well, I built the suit, so I made it comfortable, first of all. I knew I was going to be in it. It's not usual for somebody to be given the job of building the suit and wearing it right off the bat. Ordinarily, you get the job to build it, and then somewhere along the line somebody says, would you be willing to wear it? But this thing came all in a bunch, which was great. We had a long process. We burnt marshmallows to figure out what they looked like. We carved, we did all kinds of different versions of...
And we actually argued a lot about it, if I recall
Oh,
correctly.
yes.
I wanted to do it one way, and Bill wanted to do it in a way that was completely opposite, and you won.
Yeah.
Are we talking about character design, or are we talking about the actual build?
No, we're talking about the Bill.
Specific build. He wanted to sculpt and cast everything
Bill was right, by the way.
the way you wanted to do it.
And by the way, correct me if I'm wrong, there are a couple of shots that have no opticals in them at all. They're the Marshmallow Man walking on a miniature street scene. And the result of that was that is the first time we ever screened the movie, we screened it 3 weeks after we finished shooting, with only one special effect in the movie. So people were watching it and there were no special effects. But there was one shot of the Marshmallow Man because it was done with no optical. So you could actually, people kept saying, look at that on the screen, look at that, look at that. And suddenly there was a shot of a Marshmallow Man. And people in the audience went crazy. It was weird. It was actually one of the best screenings I've ever been to. I mean, we wanted to see if the humor worked and the characters worked without any of the opticals. I mean, if we had opticals, we would have used them, but they were still being done at that point. But there are shots of the Marshmallow Man that have no optical design in them whatsoever. They're just shot with a camera, with a guy in a suit on a miniature street. It's a beautiful street. Like there's a shot of, I'm saying this because nowadays you look at it and probably say, oh, it's an optical, or it's CGI. There's a shot where a fire hydrant is broken and there's water spurting up. And when I saw that, I went nuts.
It was actually silica sand being blown up. We had shot
Mark
it.
Stetson actually built all the miniatures and came up with that sand blowing up on the miniature fire hydrant for water. It's great.
Pete Gerard. Pete Gerard came up with the sand. Actually, we had shot the scene once, and Richard said, okay, we have it. Now, was there anything we could add to make it really special? And Pete Gerard was sitting out there in the screening room, and he said, if we blew some silica sand up through a fire hydrant, it would look like miniature water. And sure enough, it did.
You've got a better memory than me. It was the 80s.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the scenes that you were in, Bill, because there's some really fun scenes. There were some impromptu scenes. Let's talk about the mayor's office and some of the improv.
And I'd like to ask him something else, because Bill was, a very serious actor, and has been in some great movies. And I'm very curious what it was like to show up on the set of. Because I can't compare it to other movies. This was, believe it or not, almost the first movie I ever spent every day on this. It was the first movie I ever spent every day on the set of. But he starred in a couple of movies before then, and what was this like?
Reason he's a terrific producer is that he was on the set every day, and it's a really cool, great thing for a producer to be. So, well. There was. I'll begin this. It has to do with the suit. It has to do with the suit. Does this work? Okay. Mentioning the suit, there was a lot of people who are interested in movies might have. Theone Aldrich, who was a designer, who passed away a couple of days ago. And she was a great designer. and she did the costumes for Ghostbusters. She was a great film. She did tons of movies, and she was a very classy gal, and I knew her for many years from the Public Theater in New York. But in terms of what it was like, I knew when they asked me to do this, so what am I going to do, try to be funny? I mean, that's insane. That's insane. These are the comic geniuses of our time. What am I going to do? You know, what, impressions? What am I going to do? So Ivan and I, we talked, and I said, I think it would be fun, and it might work if, and I'll get to the Yoni, but because it's part of it. If I'm like a male Margaret Dumont. If you know who she is in all the Marx Brothers movies. She is the foil. She is the one that they're always making fun of. She didn't know that anything was funny. She didn't understand why the Marx Brothers were funny. She was playing every scene like it was Camille. And so I said, I have to do that. If I do that, you know, I won't die. Or if my head, when it falls in the basket, won't be okay, you know. So that's essentially what it was. And Theone and I made a suit. And I never changed that suit. So every scene that I'm in, you know visually who I was and who I was supposed to represent. And I grew a beard. So that visually, I was going to be the nuclear bureaucrat. And so whenever I appeared, whatever I was, how much of, you know, an idiot or an asshole, everybody thought, they said, that's him. And that's what we decided to do. So it was kind of like, you know, at the time I was a, you know, New York actor on the stage and being really cool and all this, and staring sensitively into the sunset, and all of a sudden there I am with Murray, and I'm, you know, and it's Nicholas time, you know. But that scene and all of that at the mayor's office was really extraordinary because half of it was improvised. And it was obviously because of Ivan's great talent, but it was also Bill's genius because once everybody once we were all comfortable in who we were and what we were supposed to mean, then we could kind of improvise and go places. So it was an extraordinary situation. I've never had anything like it in my life. It was an enormous amount of fun. And it kind of, afterwards, you just went, well, what happened there? And you know, but we really didn't know exactly what happened, except that it was rather an extraordinary scene. And there were tons of people in that office, and everybody was just going on the roll. And it's one of those signature lovely times, you know, and whatever you do, if you have that signature lovely time, that was one of them. So I'll always remember that. Very, very fond.
But by the way, that scene, it's not actually in the mayor's office, but it's in the mayor's building, the office for the mayor's, the building where the mayor's office is, and I think it was the vice mayor's or someone, and it looks exactly like his office. So a lot of things that would normally have been shot on the set are actually shot on location in this movie. The outside of the firehouse is still there, it's in New York. The inside is a real firehouse in downtown LA. They're the same style. And everything at Columbia, we weren't allowed to call it Columbia, but everything at the university is actually shot at the university. There's, the main set we built was Sigourney's apartment and the roof of the building, which filled a whole stage. It filled the biggest stage on what was then the Burbank Studios. Oh, this is all this stuff. Except for a few shots. When the earthquake takes place, that was done on the Columbia Ranch near what's now Warner Brothers. Everything else is actually shot in Central Park West. It says 550. It's actually 55. Is the real building. The building's really there. We added some decoration. John the Cure did, and we were shooting on the street. Bill was saying about it because, you know, obviously we closed down the street. And it was on 3 nights in a row, as well as a couple of daytime things. And Yes, and, oh, we were getting so much shit. I have so many stories to tell about that. One of which is Danny saw Isaac Asimov, who lives near there, going into a building, went running over and saying, Mr. Asimov, I'm such a fan. And Asimov looked at him and said, are you responsible for this? You know, you're wrecking our, and I would just, people would say, what's going on? I still remember when we lit all the way down 7th Avenue for the Marshmallow Man. People were coming up and saying, what's going on? You know, we were using every large lighting thing in New York, and people were saying, what's going on here? This is terrible. They're stopping traffic. And I'd say, at the same time as we were shooting, Francis Coppola was shooting The Cotton Club. And I'd say, Francis, man, he's nuts. So it was an amazing experience, and to be in New York and do that, and all of that was really shot in Central Park West, quite near 59th Street, so it was really a bad place to be. Apparently it stopped traffic all the way down to the Village.
Well, you're a producer, and as a producer, as you just pointed out, this was the first time that you had spent all day on a set. There are two different types of producers. There are the producers who deal with getting the scripts and dealing with all those elements and putting them together and packaging them for the studios. And then there are actually producers that spend the time on the set to make sure that everything is done. You're also dealing with a very well-known producer who's been producing for a long time, Ivan Reitman, who was also directing. What's that relationship like?
Well, I've been working with Ivan for 30 years. I was a friend of his in Toronto, and he brought me down. I was teaching at the University of Toronto, actually, and he asked me if I wanted to come down and work with him, and I came down and we did Stripes, but Stripes was shot mainly in Kentucky, and I never went to Kentucky. I was staying, running the office. And by the way, my joke was, at that time, Coppola, I keep bringing his name up, had bought a studio here in town, a building, and he had, I think, like 400 people working for him, and he was making 2 movies. And Ivan was making 2 movies, and he had me. Literally, there was just the 2 of us. You know, after we found, Danny did a first draft of the script, which about the only thing left from that draft is the Marshmallow Man. The Marshmallow Man was in the very first draft of the script. And Danny had done drawings. He and friends of his had done drawings of the equipment, of the Marshmallow Man, of the logo. Though Mike Gross refined the logo. So with Ivan and I, he was busy directing. So, I mean, he was producing to the extent that, like, the biggest fight I had with him was, because the studio was not phoning him at 3 in the morning when we had to go to work at 6. They'd phone me and say, do you really, can't you save some money somewhere? So I actually was arguing with him that I didn't want to do the earthquake, because it seemed to me that everything was going fine. Without an earthquake, going into the building would have been enough. And he kept arguing that we really needed one more obstacle in their way. And, he got his way. He gets his way. Because he's producing and directing. But he can't deal with when he's directing, there's a great, actually, I usually don't like these stories in the paper where they interview a bunch of people, but yesterday or Sunday, they interviewed 5 directors in the LA Times. And it was great because they all said that, talked about that feeling of, you try to let everyone think you know what you're doing, but every day is a struggle, and every day is you're fighting time and the weather and all that. And it's very hard when you're doing that to actually be the producer too, of dealing with every little problem that comes up. So Ivan and I have been doing it together for about 30 years now, so you get your own rhythm and language.
Let's talk a little bit more about special effects. When you're dealing with the creature shop and you're dealing with all of the ghosts, did you do any of the directly with the cast? Because a lot of the Slimer stuff, the hotel, that obviously was just green screen.
No, we actually did not. We shot most of it at Richard Edlund's place. But I would like to bring up one thing that maybe because this is a Ghostbusters group, you might know this, but I'm not sure that you do. But it's pretty obvious that this film is Bill Murray's film, right? He's the star. I mean, it couldn't be Ghostbusters without Bill Murray, right, Peter Venkman? Yeah. It is, right? It was not written for Bill Murray. It was written for John Belushi. But we all know that he had a bit of an untimely death. And so when we were designing Slimer, the word came down from ArcLight and Ramis when we had gone through 8 weeks of making changes. Should he have ears? Take his ears off. Make his mouth bigger. Make his mouth smaller. Make his nose wider. Make his nose less wide. All of these things. What's that? Yes, for Slimer. 8 weeks into it, we were almost approved. Ivan liked it. Everyone was happy with it. The word came down from ArcLight and Ramus to make him look like Belushi all of a sudden. And it turned out that it was an homage to Belushi. So somehow, Belushi, even though he was dead, could still be in the movie. Because think about it, the ghost is kind of like Belushi. And so, I mean, it is.
Bluto in Animal House.
That Belushi, yes. So, but we shot almost everything on stage. We shot all of your stuff on stage. We shot all the Slimer stuff on stage. We shot the librarian on stage.
You guys might not have been there, but Richard was on the set with his. Can I swear?
Yes, you may.
It was called Boss Film Corporation, which actually stood for apparently big fucking camera, because they would come with their 65mm camera, and I still remember the very last shot in the movie was shot in 65 because we lost like 6 stops while the shot was going on. It was just about to start to rain, and the clouds came in, and I think Richard was also on the stage at Burbank. There's a shot where we had to. The set that the Cure built filled the entire stage. And to get one shot, we had to open the door of the stage and pull the camera outside the stage and shoot into it. And I have a vague memory of Richard being there with the big camera too. So there were some scenes where we had to accommodate the large special effects camera. But most of it was done, and I used to love visiting them because they had the neatest shot. It was clean, neat. They had the best coffee. They were being very serious. I thought these guys are real craftsmen, scientists, geniuses.
Mad scientists.
Yeah, mad scientists. But
we actually had 3 or 4 different buildings, and
I remember Marina Del Rey.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it was a compound. Richard had his building where all the optical effects were done, and there was a building of shooting stages, and then there was the building where we built the creatures, and Mark Stetson built the miniatures. So it was all sprawling throughout the marina.
What was the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man made of after he exploded? What was the concoction?
That was shaving cream.
I think Bill should know.
William knows.
It was shaving cream, and I had a little bit of a worry at one time because I'm going to be slimed and it's going to fall on me, and I was right underneath it, and I said, "How much shaving cream is going to fall on me?" And they said, "Well, it's shaving cream," and I said, "Yeah, but how much?" And they said, "Well, I don't know, it maybe 100 pounds, but it's shaving cream." And I said, in the 8th grade, 100 pounds of feathers and 100 pounds of lead is still 100 pounds. So we figured, could we just kind of test this out a little bit, and so everybody went, "Oh God, all right." Acting like, okay, all right, so fine. So they pulled out this kind of helpless stunt person, and they put him under the thing, and so they're all standing around going, "Okay, man, okay." So they opened it up and they knocked him flat. And I went, I just thought I'd make a point. And if we can make this a little, we'll go a lot faster, and I'll be a lot happier, and we'll get out before it's 6 o'clock in the morning. But so that's what it was. It was all shaving cream, and I think aerated more and more as time went on. So.
Actually, I heard that stuntman got hit with mentholated shaving cream, and that they changed that for you.
Well, they're good. Thank you.
By the way, when he says special effects, there are 2. We use the term, there are optical special effects, which these guys did, but there are also special effects people who do like gunfire, explosions, that don't have any opticals in them, no miniatures. And surprisingly, in the beginning of the movie, all the effects of the books passing the librarian and the card catalog blowing up, they're all done real time. They're done on the set by the special effects guys. And by the way, in trivia things, the library really is the New York Public Library. The top part, the stacks are the LA Public Library downtown. And a lot of it was like that. The outside of the firehouse is New York, the inside's LA.
I'm going to run it out and take some questions now. Who would like to ask something? Okay.
You said that when you're making the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, you didn't sculpt it and cast it. How did you sculpt
Well, actually, the head, the hands, and the feet were sculpted out of clay, cast in molds, and then run in either foam latex or latex polyfoam. But the body was constructed. There was an under layer of a semi-rigid foam we call L200 that it was flexible enough to give as I walked, but firm enough. Well, the first version didn't have that shell on the inside, and the first time we shot Stay Puft, as it approached, it resembled a baby vagina. And so we thought we should stiffen it up a little bit between them.
That was probably a good call. We apparently have very little time left, so here I'm gonna ask the question that I always love to ask, which is, each of you guys, what was your favorite moment, and what was the worst moment? Moment where you're just like, oh, what am I doing here? And the other flip side is, this is just the greatest thing in the world. I think the mayor's office sounds almost like that. May have been that moment for you, Bill, but what was it?
Well, I didn't have a bad moment. I had kind of an epiphany at one point on Central Park West at 5 o'clock on a Friday night, and the city was shutting down to shoot our scene, and all I could think of was, wow, I'm in a really big movie. For this to happen, that's a signature moment for me.
For me, it might have been the montage sequence when the guys are chasing ghosts all over town and we're playing Ray Parker's music. What had happened, we'd shot all night the night before at, on Central Park West, went to bed around 7 a.m., 6 a.m. I think, got up around 10, went out with 2 trucks. One car, Danny was driving the Ectomobile. We had no permits to shoot anywhere. And we followed in a small truck with cameras. I'm in one of the shots, and we had no extras, no anything. And we just, and made it, as we drove around, said, let's go here, let's go there. And in fact, I think in the scene at Radio City, what's it called, the area? At Rockefeller Center. There was a policeman, when the guys are running, there was actually a guard chasing us. Saying, you have to get out of there. And then we finished around 3, we went to sleep for 4 hours, got up and started shooting again in Central Park West. And it was a long day, but it was a lot of fun.
The worst moment for me was the night before Slimer shot, when it wasn't even remotely finished. That was kind of a nightmare, but probably the best moment was the next day when it was finished, and not only did we actually pull it off and bring him to life, but I found myself on set not speaking to the performer that was wearing the costume, the device, who actually looked through the huge mouth. His head was in there blacked out with velvet, and he was looking through the mouth of the character, but I found myself looking at the eyes that were up here, actually talking and directing Slimer, as if it was a real ghost on set. I'm like, this seems to be working, so it was kind of fun.
Funny, I was looking out through the mouth as well, and everybody always talked to the eyes. But the worst moment, it wasn't actually on set. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, after we shot the first blast. First time they shoot Stay Puft. How many of you noticed that I wasn't wearing my tie? Anybody? Anybody? I sat up, bolt upright in bed, said, oh, he wasn't wearing his tie. And then I had to go talk to Michael Gross about it. We watched the screening. Everybody congratulated us on it, and then I had to go tell him.
These days, they would just put it back on digital.
Oh, sure. But he said, there's so much going on in that shot that nobody will probably notice.
Until you just brought it up. Good work.
All right, we're going to do one more amazing question from the audience. That person who just put their hand up, yep, go ahead. It's got to be amazing.
This is more of a question for the producer. When I was watching this movie, I realized how delightfully absurd it is, and I was curious if you could talk about the difficulties of getting a huge effects-driven sci-fi horror comedy off the ground and actually selling it to a studio that is totally fine if you spending millions of dollars and shutting down parts of New York City. But you've got no franchise behind it. Amazing.
Actually, a lot of people agreed with you at the time and thought we were nuts, including some people working on the movie. But what happened was Bill was coming off of Stripes. Danny, or it was 2 or 3 years before we made Stripes with Bill, Danny had just made Trading Places. So they were both coming off of big hits. Harold had been in Stripes, had directed Caddyshack by then, I think. And so they were hot. And Ivan's last movie had been Stripes. So this is a true story about how easy it was that way, which was it was Danny's idea. He had this 250-page script, and which it seemed impossible to make. And Ivan went to lunch with him at Art's Deli in the Valley, and came back and said, said to me, he and Danny came in and said, do you think Harold would want to work on this? Help write this? And I said, well, if you let him be in it, he will, for sure. And Harold had an office across the street from us. We were at one side of Warner Brothers, and he was across the street. And so Danny and Ivan were walking down the street, and they ran into Mark Canton, who was then running Warner Brothers. He said, hi, where are you going? And he said, well, we're going to make a movie together. We're going to go see Harold and see if he wants to be in it. And Bill's going to be in it. And they continued on, and they got back, and they said, yeah, Harold wants to do it. And while we were talking, the phone rang. It was Mike Ovitz, and he said, Mark Canton just phoned me and said, you guys are making a movie, and his checkbook is open. But we were at Columbia. They'd made Stripes. They were making a movie with Bill of The Razor's Edge. And, we've been used to working with them and liked them. So we walked over, I remember, and this doesn't make sense unless they'd already worked on the script. But I think it was Danny's original script. And we walked over to see Frank Price and another guy who was working with them, I remember. And they said, this was about March of 1983. And they said, well, what do you think it'll cost? And I still remember held the script up and said, feels like 25. we didn't know. It actually cost about 33. The most expensive movie we'd ever been near was Stripes, which was $11 million, I think. So we had no concept of what it really cost. He said, feels like 25, and they said, probably more. And then they said, okay, fine, but you have to have it out by June 1984. So we didn't have a script, hadn't cast people like Bill yet, hadn't gotten the special effects going. So we began actually hiring special effects people, got involved with Richard, hiring designers and things while they were working on the script. Danny and Ivan and Harold, I remember went to Martha's Vineyard during the summer and worked on the script and came back in September. And Bill was just committed to it. Had said, unlike the way he is nowadays, just said yes. He'd gone to India to make The Razor's Edge. And I don't think he read the script till he arrived back. The day he came back, we shot with him. He got off a plane. He was in New York. We took him to, we brought him into town, put him in the uniform. And I still remember, Ivan said, we were on a street in New York. I think it was somewhere near Central Park. And the three guys came walking down the street in their outfits. Just in the streets of New York, walking about a block towards us. And I was standing with Ivan, he looked at them and he said, this is going to be great.
I would like to thank Bill, Steve, Joe, Bill. Thank you very much.